Okay, so this is Mr. West, what's its most stylish, and today I'm in Explain Everything mode, thinking out the January 2010 Cold War mock that you've just completed. Okay, now then, what I want you to do when you go through the work is, for each question I want you to obviously look about how to improve, but I want you to start off by thinking about two things that you've done well, you know what I mean, two things that have gone well, because too often we forget about that, okay, and we just focus on what needs improving, and then when you've done that, then you can write down the two things you wish to improve, okay. Once you've made that clear, you've had a little bit of a look at the mark scheme or whatever, then you're in a position to rewrite the question, okay, or rewrite's maybe too strong a word, but you're in a position to sort of edit your answer to make it a bit better, okay. Obviously you're going to do that in green pen. Alright, let's get into the exam then. Okay, so the first thing to think about with this kind of question is the main message, okay, and that's where a lot of people can slip up. Alright, people did with this mock really well at picking out the details from the source and using their own knowledge, but it's just getting that main message, okay. Now let's just talk about what's happening here. So, as it says in the mark scheme, the main message is that the good, clean-cut Guy Kennedy is standing up to the threat of the scoundrels who are riding into town. And I think that they start riding into town that a lot of people have not picked up on. There's Kennedy, here he is, he's like the sheriff, isn't he? Okay, in the town. Alright, and he's standing up, he's stopped there. Are they going to be able to pass him? No. Okay, and perhaps then that the ride into town for me symbolises the fact that Khrushchev has been able to place ballistic missiles in Cuba, only 90 miles away from America, and that's sort of he's therefore with Castro riding into the Western Hemisphere, riding into America's sphere of influence, if you will. Okay, and that's that. So that's, I think, the main message, and he's standing up to them and saying, "You're not going to get past." Okay. Obviously, if you've seen any westerns, which I confess I haven't seen a huge amount, this idea of gunslingers and this idea of a bit of a kind of a face-off is what it's all about. Okay. Obviously, have a look down here. You can see that there's some clear examples there of what needs to happen. Now then, what did people do well? Well, they picked out a couple of features. First of all, Castro on a donkey there, and people said, "Oh, he thinks he's the big player, Castro. He thinks, you know, he's important, but actually he's just been used by Khrushchev," and you can see that because he's on a donkey. He's also kind of not looking at how serious situations by swinging his gun on his finger. Okay, you also picked out that Kennedy was dressed in a more kind of clean-cut white colour, whereas Khrushchev looks like the bad guy dressed in black. Okay, so I think that, as I said, the main message is there. It's this idea of them riding into town and Kennedy standing up to them. Now, in terms of the main message, obviously that's an example provided by the exam board. What I would say is that a lot of people got credit for what they said, even if they didn't quite get this idea of riding into town and Kennedy standing up to them. Okay, but what I would do is probably have a go and rewrite the main message part, if that's the key. And obviously you've got your own knowledge there. Okay. What people did well was engaged with the date, which is obviously the day after the quarantine is declared. Okay, so it could be that again could be a way of adding on for a kind of a higher level. By picking on the date there, you might say, well, actually, perhaps Kennedy's standing up to these two as they ride it out, as almost the gunslingers approach the quarantine line. Obviously, that's not what's provided in the mark scheme, but I think that again that could be another way of looking at it. Alright, so in terms of your own knowledge, obviously the date and what you know is happening around that date. Okay, 23rd is where the quarantine is put in place, and it's as if on the 20th, and that's what this cartoon is depicting. That could also be the main message of the cartoon as well, even though it's not in the mark scheme. Okay, so I think that what I would say that the key things to do well on this question, okay, are obviously the main message. I'll write it again. Okay, and details from the source. But I think people did that well. And then also your own knowledge, and in this case, I think the best own knowledge answers focus on the dates, or the date even, because there's only one date provided. Yeah, okay. So that's what I would say in terms of this question. Okay, have a look back through. Obviously, if you're getting up to level 5, you've got both the details of the source and your own knowledge in there. If you're in level 4, you're doing one or the other, and if you're in level 3, which is 4, you've got the main message, but you've failed to back it up with details. Okay. Okay, now these in terms of knowledge on the topic, this question was answered very, very well. In terms of overall marks, though, not enough people were in this area here of getting the top mark for this, okay? Not enough people in that area, really. And why is that? It's because it's description rather than explanation. I've not included it here, but at the top of the mark scheme for 3 or 4 marks would be describes. Okay. Now, those students who simply in one paragraph list all the reasons why Kennedy could claim victory can only get 4 marks. Even if you have the knowledge to get up here, you're only going to get 4 marks. What you must do is you must explain the answer with 1 or 2 paragraphs, okay, or potentially 3, all right. And each paragraph must do what it says on the left-hand side of the screen here, okay. It must tell me the answer. What's the topic of the paragraph? What evidence have you got? And then link it back to the statement why Kennedy could claim victory. Let's work up an example. Okay, so what do I mean by this topic, evidence and link, okay? Well, first of all, if we look at the mark scheme here, we can see that there are areas where it's talking about Kennedy's reputation. I think what's so strange about this mark scheme is that I actually don't think these answers here are actual explanations, okay? So we've got to be careful about using those, but we can certainly get ideas from them. Let me talk about this then. So I've come to ask this question. My first paragraph, okay, that's the key, is that it's a paragraph. Okay, it looks like a paragraph, and that's really important. Okay, it's not something where you've just jotted down a few words. It is a paragraph. Okay, I'm going to talk about Kennedy's reputation. Okay, so one reason why Kennedy came victory was because he increased his reputation during the Cuban Missile Crisis and afterwards. Right, what's the evidence of that? Well, he was seen as weak and inexperienced, okay, as a very young president, okay, and particularly after the Bay of Pigs disaster in April 1961, he looked like he was weak. He looked like he couldn't really stand up to Khrushchev, and he almost wasn't strong enough as a world leader. However, after this victory, okay, or what he would claim as a victory in the Cuban Missile Crisis, where he had stood up to Khrushchev, he'd sort of got rid of the Bay of Pigs there. He'd got rid of that kind of from the memory, and he was in a much stronger position than before, okay? And obviously 2 years later, Khrushchev loses his job. Kennedy obviously still is until he gets assassinated. So what I'm saying is that he's in a much stronger position. Now that there, okay, will maybe be 5 or 6 lines, but it would actually be one explained reason, okay? You could think also, developing from that, another reason could be Kennedy was seen as a bit of a peacekeeper, because again he'd stood up to those hardliners in his own government who wanted war, those military men that you saw in the film 13 Days, that were at him all the time to go to war. He'd stood up to them, and he managed to fashion a peaceful solution when one wasn't really seen as possible. All right, and that gave him the impression as a peacekeeper, you know, and that as a great statesman, if you will, and that really was another reason why he could claim victory. Finally, he could have the nature of the deal that Kennedy was able to strike. In public, he seemed like he was victorious. What he did was, in public, he agreed to Khrushchev's first letter, saying that the America would never invade Cuba as long as missiles were moved out. And then in a private assurance done through his brother Bobby, he said that within 6 months, the Jupiter missiles would be taken out of Turkey. So in private, he answered Khrushchev's second letter. But ultimately, it's the public sphere where this is won and lost. And even, you know, years after, there's an article, I think from 2010, that we read in lesson, and even then it said most Americans are unaware of this secret deal. They just see Kennedy as the victor. So in public he was able to claim himself as a victory, and that is much more important than in private. Again, that's another paragraph I could have written, all right? And I think what the key point is some of you didn't know enough for this, and you need to revise that. But the vast majority of you didn't get the marks you deserve because you didn't write it in the style that it's there. Now, some people also write appeal paragraph. That's absolutely fine. Just for me, topic, evidence, link sticks in my mind, okay, for these 8 or 6 mark explain questions, okay? So let's have a look at that and make sure we're getting the full marks that we deserve for this question. Okay, so let's deal with the 2A question. What was decided at the Yalta Conference in February 1945? Now, it's simple as this. It's marked on what you call a penny points system, where literally any relevant point, and you can see we've got some here, okay, any relevant point is to be given a mark, okay. And the only point I would say about this is that some people, I think, spent far too long on what is a 4-mark question, okay. If you're under the cosh, this is not the question to spend a huge amount of time on. Get 2 or 3 answers down quickly in a couple of lines and move on, okay. Some people wrote half a side for this, and yeah, they got 4 marks, but I sort of was reading and I thought, well, you've got 4 marks now. Okay, so that's the only bit of advice really I would give for that 2A question, is to make sure that obviously you've done your revision, you know the stuff, and you sorted that, okay. I wouldn't be worried about having spending too long on that. There are the answers, obviously I've circled them in blue. If you need to pause the tip, and have a look at those and just add those in, okay. Only problems occur when people start telling me about the Potsdam conference and disagreements, or just getting themselves a little bit muddled up, okay. So there are those, have a look at that and make sure you've got the 4 marks available. Okay, then we move on to 2B, which is another explain question, okay. This time it's only for 6 marks, but all the principles of the 8 marker are valid, okay. So this idea here of the topic, evidence, and linking it together, certainly that is the case, okay. Now then, why there was a breakdown in relations between the USSR and the West from 1945 to 1946, okay. Now, here in the mark scheme, you've got lots of answers, okay, to help you to explain that. My personal one I would go for, first of all, would be what to do with Germany, okay. Russia wanted to cripple Germany, huge losses during the Second World War. Russia wants to cripple Germany, okay, whereas America doesn't want to repeat the mistakes of Versailles, okay, after the First World War. So they're looking to build Germany stronger and also get a good trading partner in there. So there's 2 different views about what to do with Germany, and this manifests itself in not only how Germany should be treated as a country, but also in reparations. How much money should Germany pay for losing the war? And obviously this means that because they have these 2 different ideas about what to do with Germany, means that there's actually a breakdown in relations, because the central issue is what to do with Germany, okay. It was what they were united against. Hitler was this coalition. It's a dodgy coalition, if you will, in terms of ideas. You've got the capitalist, communist, very different ways of working, but they were united against Hitler. Once Hitler's gone, what to do with his country becomes a central question, and it's one they cannot resolve, and that's why there's a breakdown in relations. Now, some examiners would have just given that effort from me there a full 6 marks, okay, because as you can see, it says well, develops 1, explain reasons 5, adds further to level 4. So you're in the 5 or 6 bracket there, and what I would do is just to add to that is I would perhaps say about Stalin in Eastern Europe, okay. That's another reason why there's a breakdown in relations, was Stalin in Eastern Europe, okay. Basically, we use this phrase, liberated from freedom, where he liberates the countries in Eastern Europe as he takes them over, but then he leaves his armies there, okay. And obviously, as the years move on, we can see that actually he takes over these countries, but be mindful of the dates, and 45 and 46, okay. Be mindful of the dates, but I would say that this idea of how he just sort of left his army there and sort of took over in a sort of de facto way, meant that the Americans were unhappy. Stalin was allowed a sphere of influence at Yalta. What had he actually got was, well, he'd just taken over these countries, hadn't he? Now, it appeared that way at this stage. And obviously, again, your other issue could be like the atomic bomb, okay? But I think that what we need to see here is that nothing I'm telling you really you don't know, okay? It's about saying, right, let me write this in a style. And what would be good is to see students actually planning this style. All right, this is my plan, sir, of how I'm going to answer this question. This is the 2 topics I'm going to cover. These are my evidence in brief, and this is how it links to the statement or the question, okay? Boom, boom, there you go. Then I can write them out, and actually practicing in that style. The only thing I would say is that the dates are vitally important here, all right? And if you're telling me, as a number of you were, about the Berlin blockade, no marks, okay? Because it's not within the parameters of the dates set in the question, all right? So that's a really important point for everybody just to consider when they're working on this, on any question. Make sure your answer actually fits the dates. The number of students had to give 0 to, when clearly they knew quite a lot about just the wrong topic. Okay, so the Part C question. Now, the first thing I would say about the Part C question is that it's not on this paper because it's an older one, but you need to add +6 there for spelling and grammar. Now, the key points, obviously, capital letters, spelling of keywords. Now, this question has got, you can see there, Berlin blockade, Marshall Plan, Cold War, all with capital letters, and all need to be dealt with in that fashion. So what I would say is obviously make sure that you look at the question and make sure you get the key things right. Spelling of key names, key places and things like that. We should be looking to get, as far as I can see, a high mark, 4, 5 or 6, well really 5 or 6 out of 6, okay, for this. Obviously the structure of your answer comes into it, punctuation, as well as capital letters and spelling. But this is something that we should be looking at. These 10 marks can be quite difficult to get, but the 6 marks for spelling and grammar are not difficult to get. So we should all be trying that. Make sure the time management comes in. Right, let's look at the question then. The Berlin blockade was more to blame than the Marshall Plan for increasing Cold War tension. Now we all want to be looking to be down here, explaining the impact, that's the key word, of the Berlin blockade and the Marshall Plan. Okay, we're going to do both sides. So the Berlin blockade is the first major international crisis of the Cold War. Okay, Stalin blockades or rail on road links into Berlin. And sort of says, what are you going to do now to the West? You can't ram that, it'll be an act of war. He thinks he's outmanoeuvred them, but then the Americans and British fly over the top into Berlin. Plane lands every 3 minutes at Berlin's Tempelhof Airport. 2 million men, women and children in Berlin are kept supplied. Roughly nearly 9,000 tonnes a day are required to keep the city going, or that part of the city, and that's what happens, okay? So obviously you need to tell me a little bit about what happens, and this is the key point, okay, is was it more to blame for increasing Cold War tension? So what I would say is that this point I've written here then, okay, the first major international crisis of the Cold War, I think that's really important because it's a start, but people see that how serious Stalin's going to take this, Stalin sees how serious the West is going to take it. Both sides are prepared to not lose face over this issue, and I think that's a key point as well. It's the first time we see the real tension that's been bubbling under really from sort of towards the end of the Second World War. Okay, certainly before Yalta, there's this idea from Stalin that he believes that the West has been can't be trusted. They've been late moving on D-Day to get into Europe, and they only did that because it looked like Stalin was going to take over Europe. They haven't done their fair share, and this mistrust he has for the West runs right through. Okay, and this is the first time that we can see that really clearly plays out. Obviously, as well, Stalin has to give up the blockade. He thought he played the trump card by blockading Berlin, saying, what are you going to do, ram it? It's an act of war. But by being outmanoeuvred, we've seen that chess sauce, haven't we? With the chess pieces, outmanoeuvred, then basically he's had to give it up as a bad job. So it's kind of a defeat for him, and that's really increased the tension, and it's sort of shown how America won't give in. Then, let's have a look at the Marshall Plan then. So April 1948, for 4 years, the Marshall Plan was operational for, and it linked the Truman Doctrine because it aimed to stop the spread of communism by providing vast amounts of money to areas where America believed countries that were susceptible to communism. Began in Greece and Turkey, dealing with the civil war there, okay, and moved on to help most of Western Europe. Most of the money came to Britain, okay, but also to West Germany, France, and other countries like that. And the aim was to try and stop them from having to turn to communism, because if they got the countries going, the aim of the Marshall Plan America believed that ultimately only countries that are economically suffering turn to communism. So if you can get the country going, they won't have to become communist. All right. Now Stalin's reaction to this, to try and link it to the question and explain its impact, was to describe it as economic imperialism. He believed that America was trying to economically take over Europe, okay, all right, not in name, not politically, but certainly from an economic point of view. And there was something to that, because clearly the trading benefits to America of the Marshall Plan, of putting its goods into Europe, were huge. So there were benefits there to be had, okay. Stalin tried to put his own plan together, okay. The Molotov plan, okay, which didn't really have the funds behind it to have the same kind of impact, all right. Obviously, there's the issue of Yugoslavia as well, who moved away from Stalin, stayed communist, but moved away from Stalin's control, and actually took some of the Marshall Plan money to help rebuild its country, and that again caused a huge amount of tension. So what I think is clear to understand to get level 4 is you've got to know what each of the things are, what the Berlin blockade is and what the Marshall Plan is. You've got to tell us about those, but through the idea of answering the question, in this case, increasing Cold War tension. Okay, so that's what you've got to look at. Obviously, just telling us about it is only going to get you so far. Okay, in fact, it won't get you until 5 to 5, will it? Because you won't have explained the impact, okay? Obviously, you should try and do both sides, and then in terms of your evaluation, how far is 10 marks, okay? What I would like to see actually is on a different exam paper, they've written one, they often do a +2 for reliability comments. I'd like to see a +1 for that, because I've always found it hard to mark, because if you say, for example, I've got 7 out of 10 for the Berlin Blockade and Marshall Plan, but then you've done how far, where does it get marked? And my honest answer is I'm not an examiner, I don't know where that would get marked, okay? So obviously you want to try and make sure you've gone well into level 4 with both sides of it, and then when you say how far in terms of your conclusion, you can then think about what's there, okay? Yeah, so as I say, remember, look what you've done well, 2 stars for each question, and then 2 wishes as well. Obviously, if you think, oh, I've done 3 things well, and maybe only 1 thing I need to work on, that's fine as well. But certainly have a look at it, and from that point of view, what have you done well? What do you need to improve? And while you're doing this, I'll circulate around now, see what's what, see what you've put down, and then obviously you can rewrite, redraft, or just add to your answers in green pen to show you understand the areas of improvement. Thank you.